Welcome back to Sports Zone, Toby. A new thing taken on by Town Square Television this spring, football in the spring at Simile High School. It wasn't high school football, but women's professional football. The Minnesota Vixen on the gridiron. Town Square had the call 4 Saturdays in May, and the Vixen had a great season, came up just shy of the playoffs, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but a real, I think, interesting venture, not only by you here at Town Square Television, but by the Vixen as well. And I think you guys hit the mark in terms of bringing more interest to women's professional football.
Well, and thank you for James Brown and Laura Brown, the owners of the team, that brought this to us when they contacted me this winter. The Vixen have been around for 16 years, but they've bounced around the cities every year. They've had a new venue. The Browns live in Inver Grove Heights. They had a kid that went to Simile, so they wanted to bring the team locally, bring it to Inver Grove Heights, and Simile with the new renovations over there was a good fit. And I think they plan on being back next year and for a while if everything works out okay. But I tell you what, we went into this. I was a little hesitant about what to expect, but I tell you what, getting to know some of the players on the team and the coaching staff and the owners, it was a blast this year. It was a lot of fun. The quality was much better than I thought it would be, and it was some good football. They had fantastic turnouts at the games. They had great crowds, and we saw a lot of interest online of people that were watching the games, much more than our usual game of the week stuff. So it was a lot of fun this year.
Yeah, and I got to just watch the games on your broadcast, and I thought that it was really remarkable to see the interest level, not only by the players, because obviously they love to play football or they wouldn't be out there strapping the pads on, but the fans. There was a great turnout every game of the fans, and they came out, and I know they had their social hour afterward and stuff, and they got to meet the players, and I think it was a great opportunity to see that this is not just a kind of a novelty act. These are people that really, truly love the game of football, and they're out there playing. They're not getting paid. They're having fun. They're staying active, which is important. I thought it was a really well-done season. I'd like to see them make the playoffs, but and I do hope that they call Inver Grove their home for a long, long time. I thought it was a great setup, a great facility, and the location is good, too, for those teams that are coming in. They're right off the interstate, too, so it's nice. So the season, 2-2 at home, 4-0 on the road, not too shabby. It's a fun kind of football to watch. I'll let you touch a little bit more on that, but my first glance at it, I really thought it was much slower than the football I'm used to watching, high school, college, or pro, but fundamentally, it's right on the ball. I mean, they know what they're doing. You can tell they rehearse these plays and they practice. It was a lot of fun, and for a football purist, I thought it really cured my appetite for football in the spring, and that's kind of when I really need my football fix.
One of the things we talked about early in the year was a lot of these players are coming to this. A lot of them have never played football before. You take, for example, one of our local athletes, Grace Arnold from Henry Sibley, was on the team, and I think she just graduated high school recently. So a player like that, having to learn the game of football, having to learn the rules, which you and I, watching football for 30 years, could tell you all these rules. Well, these girls are having to learn plays, having to learn new rules, doing it on the fly, doing it in-game action. So very impressed of what a lot of that.
That's really cool that you bring that up, because boys are taught football second, third grade. You're taught 3-point stance. You're taught, all this terminology, everything. Some of these, like you're right, some of these women have, at age 20, are picking, or even older, are picking this up and learning it on the fly. And it shows, though, that they work hard. And I think that's the really important part.
Well, let's talk about the season real quick. You mentioned the Vixen finished at 6-2. That was good enough for second place, unfortunately, in the Midwest Division behind the Madison Blaze. Madison went to the playoffs. The Vixen, they started off 3-0. Then they dropped the next two, which put them in a deep hole to get to the playoffs, but they finished the season strong, all 3 games on the road. They beat Wisconsin, beat Madison. That was a huge win on the road. And then last week, they beat Iowa down in Iowa. I was driving late in the game. Aaron Tilford pick off at the goal line, took it back to the house 100 yards to secure that victory, and wasn't enough to get the Vixen that playoff spot. But nonetheless, they were one of the best teams in the league this year. They had one of the best records, and The format's a little goofy because they take division winners, which are set up geographically. So you had a team in Toledo that made it. They were 3-5, but that's how the geographic divisions are set up. So I think this league will continue to develop. The playoff format's already different from last year. They didn't have wild card teams last year. So the league is expanding. It's getting bigger. So it's good to see the Vixen take advantage of what you have. You have a good team in your area and good football being played at a good level. So it's a team to definitely check out next year.
Yeah, and you think about it, it's Minnesota Vixen, and they play teams in Madison and Iowa and Nebraska, but they're teams in New York, Utah, California, Ohio. This is a big deal, and if you like football, like you and I like football, and you don't care if it's flag football or if it's NFL football, if you need to see some football, this is the best entertainment dollar you can spend because it's a lot of fun to watch, and I just like to see the improvement. From the first telecast to the fourth telecast, I saw a big improvement from these women playing the game. And the most important part to me is that both teams were having so much fun out there. And the weather cooperated too. It didn't get really stinking hot. Yeah. Those evening kickoffs are real nice, and that turf kept cool. I was kind of worried about that when we went into this venture that, oh gosh, late May, it could get stinking hot. But they did well. And I think next year, they tweak the roster a little bit. They get better. They get stronger, just like any other football team. I think this team could be a playoff-bound team. We might have some playoff games against some significant opponents here in Inver Grove Heights. I'd love to see it.
Well, you mentioned some of these teams. Pittsburgh, they're owned by Franco Harris. So there's some.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, us the Vixen versus Franco Harris and the Pittsburgh Passion, but. The Vixen didn't make the playoffs, but there's an all-star game coming up, and the Vixen have nominated. There's voting going on, and some of the names that are up for nominations for to be at the all-star game. And this happens the same weekend as the championship game. So a lot of these teams in the playoffs and the championships might not be at the all-star game, but you got head coach Brandon Palenka is being nominated. And then some of the players, Erin Tilford, we mentioned her. She led the league in interceptions. She had 7.
She's in.
And she had 2 or 3 that were returned for touchdowns. She's also one of the top tacklers on the team, and she was the top receiver on the team. So Erin Tilford's a lock as far as I'm concerned. Courtney Gibson-Thomas is up for nomination. Cynthia Red Bryant, she's in her 40s. She's one of the top defensive linemen in the league as well. And Emily Evans, the quarterback, who had a fantastic season. And watching the games, you can tell she's got a huge arm. She can sling that ball. And then last but not least, Jeannie the Tank Nelson. She was the leading rusher for the Vixen. She was also great on defense. So, and some of the other names that really stood out to me this year, Drew Barber defensively, Madison Schmatz, Bryce Fetland, Whitney Phillips. This Vixen team, one of the best defenses in the league. They were really fun to watch on defense. It came up a little short to the playoffs, but hopefully some of these players get to advance and play some all-star football down the road.
Oh, it's fun to watch, and it's a cool style of football. And not many places that you can be okay by calling a woman a tank.
Right.
So that's nice, and I'm sure that player enjoyed the fact you called her out for being over 40. So someone who's close to being 40, that's always good too.
Well, I think I think a lot of these players kind of pride themselves on
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
They're really, and you get to know some of these players. They are dedicating a lot of their time.
Absolutely.
They all have full-time jobs on top of
That's what we talked about before the show.
Yep.
They work regular jobs. They don't just show up on Saturdays and play. So fun to watch. Get out there next year.
Well, with that, we're going to wrap up the show, and thanks for joining us on Sports Zone. We will see you next time.